You want to know what shilling for two corrupt regimes look like? You're going to see it in just a minute. Former ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, spoke last night at the Christians United for Israel summit, which is held in Virginia. It's an annual summit for where ardent evangelical Christians and Zionists actually go to show their support for the nation state of Israel and the evangelical community, which is Zionist, the largest Zionist group in the world, where they go and hear like these far right speakers and Jewish Zionists propagate falsehoods on behalf of their agenda, which is basically to keep Israel Jewish and to subjugate the Palestinian people while talking derogatory or pushing for war against Iran. They're a bunch of ghouls, in other words. So last night, this was Nikki Haley, the former ambassador to the United Nations under the Trump administration. She is an ardent Zionist. And in this, I clipped this video. It's basically 22 minutes long. I only clipped about maybe 7 minutes of this. But she speaks about the threat of Iran. And she basically lies in this at the podium regarding Biden's support for Iran and how much they're going to give because Iran's building a nuclear weapon and all this nonsense. By the way, the international atomic agencies have already written reports saying that Iran is nowhere near anywhere close to building a bomb. And I would think that Iran would be suicidal if they didn't try to build a bomb, because as you could see, these ghouls are basically pushing, desperate for war. So let's hear.
After Israel, the president went to Saudi Arabia. And just like in Israel, America looked weak. Biden went to Saudi Arabia to beg for oil. In reality, he needs to beg America's energy producers for forgiveness.
Oh, you mean like when Trump did it, when he went to the kingdom in 2020, 2019, and received a medal from King Salman himself? Every single president grovels before the kingdom when it comes to oil production, because the United States provides in return military assistance. And in this case, the largest humanitarian crisis in the world with the conflict in Yemen, which basically is a war crime by Saudi Arabia with the assistance of the United States. But because the United States is not part of the Rome statutes, they won't be held accountable for any type of international crimes that they commit, which are war crimes, crimes of aggression, and crimes against humanity. That's why the reason why the United States is prolific in abusing all three of those charges. But Haley is not going to deride Trump here because she's a Trump slobber knocker.
Think about what happened. If you're going hat in hand to beg Saudi Arabia to pump more oil, was it smart to insult the country beforehand? If you knew Saudi Arabia was drawing closer to Israel, moving the broader region toward peace, would you spend the better part of 2 years pushing it away?
Hegemony between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the region. Meanwhile, they've been clamoring for war for all of their adversaries, including Iran, which hasn't happened, Syria, which was pushed by Saudi Arabia, Iraq, pushed by Saudi Arabia. Should I also mention the hundreds of millions of dollars that went into funding these jihadists in Syria, which was also supported by Israel under Timber Sycamore, which was a CIA-run program, which gave funding and training to these ghoulish jihadists. But Haley's not going to bring that up, right? Because this room full of, shills and, ghouls, these are all nationalists. They don't care about hegemony region. They care about predominance. United States, Israel. And if there's only two countries left standing on the earth, do you think Israel will be standing right next to the United States? No. This is the reason why they have approximately 70 to 80 nuclear missiles. Read the Samson option. Because if Israel can't have a country, you can't have a world. And that's exactly what the Samson Option Program is about. This is the reason why you have so many countries that are allied to Israel, allow them to get away with murder of the Palestinians. We're talking about the government, not the people of Israel. Their government is a repressive human rights violator. And that's coming not just from me, but from the World Health Organization and Amnesty International. Even in the Goldstone report, where he talks about the Second Intifada, and he was forced to amend his report.
Finally, if you knew Saudi Arabia and America shared a common enemy in Iran, would you say and treat the Saudi ruler like a pariah?
Sure. He's behind the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, a U.S. journalist. He's also the government under King Fahd, anyway, is responsible for, at some level, aiding and abetting people who were involved with the September 11, 2001 attacks. I don't know how many videos I've done regarding Saudi operatives inside the United States, like Omar al-Bayoumi, Fahad al-Tamari, Osama Basnan, Saeed al-Jarrah, and God knows who else, regarding funding, but U.S. Saudi ambassador Bandar bin Sultan, aiding two known al-Qaeda operatives, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi, out west. It's not a conspiracy. That's what's in the FBI pent bomb and Operation Encore reports. I've reported on this. And I mean, God's sakes, you know, why are we groveling to a country that we know had a hand in 9/11? Well, because blood is oil is thicker than blood. That's why. And if you can't understand that, why a president will grovel before the kingdom, because the kingdom knows that it has power over the United States, because they don't need to sell oil to the United States. They can go right to Great Britain, which they tried back in the 1930s and 40s. They could go to Russia, which they tried during the Cold War. And the United States would back off their anti-concessions regarding, because the Saudis complain about the Palestinian problem. But that's just grandstanding. They don't give a crap about the Palestinians. If they did, they wouldn't be selling oil to the United States.
The crown prince is in his 30s. He will outlast most leaders in the world. We need to work with him, not insult him.
And look who she's, proposing that we work with, a murder. The guy killed an American journalist. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, during, what was it, 2015, 16, where they arrested dozens of princes and held them in a hotel. I think it was the Radisson in Saudi Arabia, and basically blackmailed these people and took away their millions and millions of dollars from these people, and basically threatened them because they consider any type of opposition a threat. In fact, Saeed al-Jubair, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, went on CNN the other day and considered any opposition a terrorist. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. A country that spends, hundreds of millions destroying a country in Yemen, which has provided military and financial aid by the United States. We're engaging in war crimes. And this is who she wants to work. This is who she wants to work with. I mean, the far right are a bunch of ghouls. They just are. Tom Cotton, Nikki Haley, God's sakes. These people are nuts. Mike Huckabee. Wow.
The truth is, Biden has been tougher on Saudi Arabia than he's been on Iran. No wonder the Saudis are turning their backs on America. No
and
wonder
we
they're
should.
making friends with Russia and China instead. And no wonder Iran thinks it can get away with murder.
Oh, really? Name me one war Iran initially engaged in. Not Iraq. That was Iraq's. Iraq started that war. Who conducted a coup in 1953 on Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh? Oh, that was the CIA. And when the coup was successful and they ousted Mohammad Mossadegh, who did they implement? Well, Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, as he's most commonly known. And he was nothing but a Western-backed puppet for 23 years, 24 years? Before the revolution took place in 1979. 26 years. So I really, I mean, good Lord, why we should be friends with Iran. More so than these Wahhabi ghouls. The Persians are proud people, morally upstanding people, and you want to go and engage in all-out conflict with them while supporting the oppressive regime of Israel and the repressive monarchy in Saudi Arabia? This is what the far right wants. This is what Netanyahu tried to get Obama back in 2017. And this is the reason why he considered him the least favorable president, US president to Israel. Even though Obama gave, on his way out, gave the largest financial deal to Israel in presidential history. But because he didn't push for a war with Iran, that Benjamin Netanyahu was begging for. And there's no difference. Look who you got in office now. Gantz and Naftali Bennett. You know, they're no better.
The Ayatollah's number one fear is America, Saudi Arabia, and Israel working together.
Yeah, for a good cause. Look what they did to Syria, an Iran ally. And like I said, that was the CIA program funded by Turkey, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Timber Sycamore, which ended under the Trump administration, incidentally enough, in 2017. The program ran for about 6-7 years, which gave weapons and trucks and financing to these Wahhabi organizations like Jaish al-Nusra and Jaish al-Islam. All these other, smaller Wahhabi sects fighting for, small pieces of territory. Where do you think they got all those brand new Jeeps they drive around in cities like Deir ez-Zor, Raqqa, the capital, in Damascus? Those videos are still around on YouTube. Where do you think they went to the dealership in Syria? They were provided by the United States. And in return, we went to war against them, on a superficial basis. And what did we do? Well, we basically didn't do enough because Russia was invited by President Bashar al-Assad and the Kurds in Turkey, who basically helped in eliminating the threat. What did the U.S. do in return? They took over the oil fields. And of course they did. Read Patrick McFarlane and Kyle Angelone's great pieces regarding, and also Connor Freeman and Will Porter, the best in the business, regarding what the United States did with those oil fields. And not to mention Lebanon, another ally to Iran. They consider Hezbollah more of a terrorist threat than the Islamic State. That's not me saying it, that's them saying it.
But the incredible collaboration that's been built over 4 years is at risk of falling apart. Due to America's weakness, Iran is in the strongest position it's ever been.
They're under harsh economic sanctions, an oil embargo, and they are only depending on, I think it's China and Venezuela. I mean, they're one of the largest exporters of oil too, Iran, as well as importers. And this is all from the United States. A lot of these economic sanctions, Great Britain as well, coalition.
Everyone knows what Iran wants. It wants nuclear weapons.
It should. I would beg them to get it. Look what happened to Iraq. Look what happened to Syria. Look what happened to Afghanistan. If you don't have a nuclear weapon, the United States, like the big bully that they are, will invade you. This is the reason why we haven't gone to war with Pakistan, for example. They got nuclear weapons. And don't get me started about that very shadowy agency called the Inter-Service Intelligence Agency, otherwise known as the ISI, who the CIA calls a state within a state. It's a whole other argument and discussion.
It wants ballistic missiles to carry those nuclear weapons, and it wants to use those missiles and nukes to destroy both Israel and America.
I mean, think of it this way, all right? Iran gets a bomb and they use it on Israel. What would be the response? Well, the response would be Iran would no longer exist. So it'd be suicide, which, by the way, they don't believe in. That's a Wahhabi ideal, martyrdom for the sake of Allah, which is not even in the Quran, by the way. So, incidentally enough, we're going to war with Shia Muslims, never against the Wahhabis, right? But that's what would happen. Iran would be destroyed. The entire country would be destroyed. And not just from the United States, but from Great Britain and Saudi Arabia, the Gulf. They would participate while they sit in the back. The United States take the brunt of the force. But yeah, Australia, the whole entire coalition would basically destroy the entire country of Iran. It would be stupid. Stupid. But they would be dumb not to get a nuclear weapon to stave off the threat of invasion, which Israel and Saudi Arabia are desperately pushing the United States to do. And they've been doing this for 30 years. Now, Iran is not like Iraq. Iraq was under brutal economic sanctions, the oil for food program in 1990, which basically decimated the interior from within, as well as being engaged with a U.S. invasion in 1990 as well. And on top of that, they were not a very formidable army. They used to be, but they were depleted. Now, Iran is a much more bigger deal. They have a formidable navy. Iraq did not. Neither did Syria. They have a formidable army. That's the reason why we killed Qasem Soleimani. Soleimani, by the way, was the liquidator, along with the Russians, on Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. And we killed him. The man who's helping in the war on terror. But that's what would happen. But if they don't get a bomb, I think they're committing self-suicide. Because I think what's going to happen is, because Trump doesn't play ball, and he doesn't like being told what to do, is you're going to get an establishment Republican. Maybe DeSantis, who's an ardent friend to Israel. And he gets in there, and the first thing he's going to do is we're going to start sending those weapons from Ukraine on over to a conflict with Iran, which will be most likely started with propaganda or a false flag, which is like most wars are. That's what's most likely would happen.
We know it's true because Iran's rulers say it. Their favorite phrases are death to Israel and death to America.
You know, Khomeini actually, Ayatollah, actually made a video explaining why they say this. And it's not against the people. And he's saying this personally. He's saying the governments of the United States, the governments of Israel, because they're the ones who are threatening Iran. Now, he said this, not me. And you can find that on YouTube. It's still up. In fact, what I will do is I'll even look for I'll look for that video. Yeah, I found it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video and show you what he meant. He's clarifying. You know, he's clarifying for what he's meaning here. So here it is.
گله میکنن که چرا ملت ایران میگن مرگ بر آمریکا. اولا بنده این رو برای حضرات بزرگان آمریکایی روشن کنم. مرگ بر آمریکا یعنی مرگ بر ترامپ و جان بولتون و پومپئو. مرگ بر اینا یعنی مرگ بر سردمداران. ما به مردم آمریکا کاری نداریم. مرگ بر آمریکا یعنی مرگ بر شما چند تایی که اون گروهی که دارید اداره میکنید کشورتون رو. مراد اینه. حالا در این دوره اینان، در دوره دیگر هم دیگران. بحث ملت آمریکا نیست. ثانیاً تا وقتی که دولت آمریکا و رژیم آمریکا همین شرارت، همین دخالت، همین خباثت، همین رذالت رو در اعمال خودش داره، این مرگ بر آمریکا از دهان ملت ایران نخواهد افتاد. من توصیم اینه که به اروپایی‌ها اعتماد نکن. در مورد آمریکا من از 2-3 سال پیش که این بحث‌های مذاکرات مربوط هسته‌ای برقرار بود دائما هم خصوصی به مسئولین میگفتم هم در جلسات عمومی در سخنرانی‌ها.
Okay, so you know, he made it clear that he's against the governments of the United States, and I don't blame him. But Nikki Haley won't tell you that. She'll say they're a threat to the United States because she's a liar.
They even write it on their missiles. Let me be clear, the Ayatollahs aren't joking. They're deadly serious. They're making a promise. We should take them at their word. And we have to make sure that they can never keep that promise by getting a nuclear weapon.
Look at all these SEALs clapping.
Sadly, America is unwittingly helping Iran achieve its evil vision. The president is desperate to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. He's made that clear, and he said he'll do almost anything to get the Ayatollahs to sign on the dotted line. That includes giving Iran more than $100 billion with a B dollars.
Which, by the way, is not true. And that's, I don't know where she got this from. She made it up. So that means she's lying here. She's basically made that up. I've read there's no concessions by the Biden administration to give them $100 billion if they signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action deal. Revisit it. I don't know where she gets this from. She's basically lying. But then again, I mean, look who you're dealing with. This is not just by the way, a far right issue. It's also a far left issue. Anything that's coming from the US government, they're lying. Just plain and simple.
You can bet that money will fund terrorist attacks on Israel and America.
I don't know of any terrorist attacks from Iran to the inside the United States. I don't know of any. I do know that the Saudis actually funded people to attack the United States. That I do know is true. This is the reason why the United States continues to cover up for them regarding the civil suits of the victims' families represented by law firms like Motley Rice and Creedler and Creedler. And just think, the United States is covering up, won't allow these victims' families of 9/11 to successfully sue the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a foreign government. What, you got to ask yourself, why? Who are they? What are they protecting? Well, it's not just Saudi Arabia, but their own involvement regarding pre-intelligence.
It's painfully obvious that the current White House is bad at negotiating. Iran won't even allow America in the negotiating room, and the president went along with it. And do you know who Biden allowed to be our lead negotiator on the Iran deal? Russia. We're letting one enemy negotiate with a second enemy behind closed doors.
The whole world's an enemy to these people. I mean, this is the danger of the far right. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. These people are just, I mean, they are dangerous. You know, there's a saying, you know, Lawrence Wilkerson, a former advisor to Colin Powell, once said that his father told him that the left will bleed you slow until you die. The right will just kill you. I mean, can you imagine can you imagine Blinken standing here saying this? Biden saying this. I mean, oh my God, these people have no qualms because they have like this quasi-religious background to them, evangelical Christianity, where they believe that New Testament is to be taken literally, that the end of the world has to come. And these are dangerous people, man. Just dangerous people. The Battle of Megiddo, the last war on earth in Israel, where all the armies descended to one area, and then Christ comes and kills all the Jews that don't turn over to Christianity. Except for the 144,000 that are raised into heaven. And these people are just dangerous. And they beg for war. And look at, she's right out saying it.
And we're supposed to believe that whatever they agree on will be good for us or Israel? How naive do you have to be? America is smarter than this. The good news is no deal has been reached. The bad news is that it could happen soon.
Yeah, there's always the bad news, right? It could happen soon. Isn't that what George Bush and Condoleezza Rice once said? That we have to attack Iraq before the nuclear bombs fall. I mean, my God, it could happen soon. In the form of a mushroom cloud. Meanwhile, we're the aggressors. We're the antagonists to the Middle East. You just take one look at our history. No matter what presidential administration, Bush, Obama, Trump, who continued and didn't start new wars, even Biden.
Negotiations keep going, and America looks willing to give it all away. Iran has already made it clear it has no intention of changing course. It kicked out inspectors and ramped up enrichment.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, the International Atomic Agency was invited by the Iranian government, and they found in their reports, and I did this in my daily news reports some months back regarding this issue of enrichment uranium, which is meant for energy purposes. And that's what they wrote in their report. Are you saying they're lying? I mean, we already know that you're making stuff up. You're lying. And you're lying for war, which makes you even more reprehensible. Makes you more dangerous.
Those aren't the moves of a country that's willing to abandon its nuclear dreams, even if it signs the deal. Mark my words, Iran will keep cheating until it gets what it wants. Anything Joe Biden signs will all but guarantee that Iran gets the bomb. No deal is better than a bad deal.
Deal is better than bad deal. Your oversimplification on this incident regarding Iran is juvenile. I mean, it's laughable. But this what makes you dangerous is because look there, kill, right? I mean, you're really just not just a danger to Iran, but you're a danger to American citizens who will engage in this war. I'm anti-war, straight up, no war anywhere. I want to see the preservation of life, not the destruction of it. If you want to see destruction of life, well, you know what? Just send a nuclear missile that way. Now, I'd like to see the responses by Russia on this. And I'm pretty sure they won't get involved because nobody wants to see total annihilation. This is the reason why Russia has not engaged with the United States regarding the US's insistence that it become involved in the Ukraine crisis, which they manufactured with a coup of a president in 2014.
And if this president signs any sort of deal, I'll make you a promise. The next president will shred it on her first day in office.
Well, she's actually saying herself, which means that is she running? Well, she won't win. She's not popular at all. I mean, the most popular Republican electees right now are DeSantis and then Trump. And I think Trump would lose to DeSantis at this time. But that didn't stop the audience from sounding like a bunch of yipping seals. You see, all these people are applauding. They're not realizing what they're applauding. They're applauding for destruction of the world, for the destruction of a country. And one thing about Zionists, evangelical or Israeli Zionists, war propagandists, they're no better than the people that they hate, which are the extremists of the Wahhabi kind. They, like ISIS, for example, they believe in a caliphate. The caliphate starts with the head of the Islamic State. And that was under Baghdadi, but he's dead. He considered himself the caliph or the ruler. And I don't know who's the head of ISIS now. I remember his name. I totally forgot about it, his name. But they believe in a total, they don't believe in hegemony whatsoever. They believe in total sole monarchy of their faith, whether it be Syria or elsewhere, but it'd be a country that rules all over. Well, I mean, the Zionists believe that. Just not in the similar theological framework. They too believe in a deity of sorts. Not all of them are secularists, by the way. They do believe in a one statehood that rules above all else. And that they'll conduct violence by any means necessary to achieve it. And we're seeing that against the Palestinians. They share so much in common, these people. Look at this standing ovation, geez.
Thank you.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do. I'm atheist, by the way, but there are some good quotes in the Bible.
Just saying, sometimes it takes a woman.
Well, I mean, what's the difference between you and Hillary Clinton, for example? Clinton is basically a woman, and she basically was the sole reason for the forced or the coup of Libya, which, by the way, now is under constant civil war, strife from an open air slave markets that didn't exist under Muammar Gaddafi. In fact, in Obama's memoirs, he regrets ever listening to Clinton and Samantha Power and Samantha and Susan Rice. It was all the women that pressured Obama to engage in that war.
You know it.
If it ever looks like Iran is getting to a nuclear weapon, we must act, and we must act swiftly and decisively. Our national security depends on keeping the bomb away from Iran. And if America won't, then Israel must, and we should help them. At a minimum, we should give Israel everything it needs to defend itself and destroy Iran's nuclear program.
They're currently doing that on their own. They have, used the Mossad to go undercover in Iran and, kill their scientists, which I would claim as an act of war. You cross into foreign borders and kill Iranian civilians or heads of government or part of government, these scientists are, that would be an act of war. But Iran has not engaged in war.
It has every right to protect its people, and no one has any right to stand in the way. Israel would be doing the world a favor.
I mean, do you need any more after that? Israel would be doing the world a favor by getting rid of the regime. This is what, this is what awaits us. And what do we do about it, right? Well, we gotta, as a people, we have to stand up and say, you know what? The hell with you people. We want a new government because this system obviously isn't working. And we need to basically push this, or else the threat of humanity is at stake. And if we don't go that far, we might be seeing a threat upon the Iranian people. Maybe China, maybe Russia, maybe North Korea, but lives will be at stake, human lives, and not just them, American lives as well, and coalition that will be involved. Will it be Israeli lives? No, they don't engage in these wars. They instigate them. Same thing for Saudi Arabia. They don't have like a standing military, these people. The only reason they're not invaded is because the United States is standing alongside both of them. The United States basically said, to hell with the both of you. What would happen to Saudi Arabia and Israel? There would be no more. Why? Because they're the sole reasons why we have so much division in the region and around the world. Now, I'm not specifically saying that it's Israel's fault, that it's Saudi Arabia's fault. Iran has its own problems, and their repressive regime upon the people. But needless to say, outside of that, Iran is not the one threatening warfare against the United States. Iran's not the one threatening warfare or invasion in Israel, because they know that the repercussions would be the entire country would be destroyed. And meanwhile, you have heads of state here in the United States who are unwavering loyal to two very repressive governments of their own, Saudi Arabia and Israel. And we need to start putting more diplomats who are not wavering to loyal to anybody but humanity. Because if we don't, and we engage in a war with Iran, I'm going to tell you the reason why we haven't up until this point is because the generals in the Pentagon know that this is a far more problematic issue than Iraq on a geographical level as well as a military level, because they have a formidable military which would come in a long, drawn-out war where probably over 1 million would be killed. And the benefits wouldn't just be the United States. It would be Israel and Saudi Arabia, who would just watch while eating popcorn on the sidelines. Well, we need to start speaking out. Stop voting for these people. Stop supporting the Republicans. Stop supporting the Democrats. And we need to stop being divided. And we need to act as a single unit and force real change with our voices. Or else it's too late.